They burned your barn, Clara. They will burn the house next. Ethan Cross stood in her doorway with gunpowder on his hands and blood down one sleeve. She did not lift her eyes from the needle. Then let them. Clara, look at me. I buried a husband last winter, Mr. Cross. I have buried everything a woman can bury and still breathe. Let them come. He crossed the room. He knelt beside her chair. He put his hand flat on the table beside her candle. From now on, Clara Whitmore, you will never work alone again. Not tonight. Not any night. Not while I am still breathing. 3 months earlier, Clara Whitmore was not yet the kind of woman who could say let them come without her voice breaking. She was simply a widow counting stitches in the dark. 140, she whispered, because counting out loud was the only thing that kept her awake past midnight. 141. 142. The candle beside her elbow was on its third wick that week. Wax had pooled and hardened and pooled again, and Clara had stopped looking at the shape of it because the shape of it reminded her of everything in her life that had been melted down and reshaped into something she no longer recognized. 143, she said. Jonah, if you can hear me, I want you to know I am very tired tonight. The house did not answer. Houses rarely did in Red Hollow, Montana, in the winter of 1879. But Clara had learned to talk to the walls the way some widows learn to talk to graves, because silence was worse than anything, and silence had a way of climbing inside a woman's ribs and building a nest there. I finished the Baxter shirt, she told the empty room. Mrs. Baxter is going to pay me $2.40, and I am going to give $2 of it to the bank, and 40 cents of it to the butcher, and nothing at all to myself. How does that sound? The walls, as predicted, had no opinion. Clara pulled the thread tight and bit it off at the knot, because her scissors had gone dull and she did not yet have the money to have them sharpened. Her teeth were not what they had been a year ago either. Hunger did that to a woman. It took things quietly, piece by piece, and then one morning she would look in a cracked mirror and barely know the face looking back. 144. That was when she felt it. Not heard. Felt. A shift in the weight of the dark outside her window. The kind of shift a woman who has lived alone on the plains learns to feel the way a horse feels a storm before the clouds have gathered. Clara's needle stopped. Who's there? She did not shout. She did not stand. A woman who stands too fast invites a man to come closer. Jonah had taught her that back when Jonah was teaching her things instead of leaving her. I said, who's there? For a long moment, only the wind answered. Then a voice low and careful, the way a man speaks when he is trying not to frighten the animal he has stumbled on. Didn't mean to startle you, ma'am. I was just passing. Passing from where to where at this hour? From the Carruthers place to nowhere in particular. Step into the light where I can see you, or step off my land. She heard boots move, slowly. The sound of a man who was not trying to hide, which was somehow worse because men who hid could be chased off with a rifle, and men who did not hide wanted something a rifle could not fix. I'm on the porch now, ma'am, not coming any closer without your say-so. What's your name? Ethan Cross. Cross. She turned the name over in her mouth. I don't know any Crosses. No, ma'am. I've been at the Carruthers Ranch about 4 months. Don't come into town much. Why were you at my window? There was a silence then, longer than it should have been. Clara's hand, which had not moved from the needle, began to move toward the small pistol she kept in the drawer of her sewing table. Jonah had bought her that pistol. It was one of the 2 useful things he had left her. The other had been debt. Mr. Cross, I asked you a question. I saw the candle, he said finally. From the road. Most houses out this way go dark by 9. Yours didn't. I thought maybe something was wrong. Thought maybe somebody was in trouble. And what were you planning to do if somebody was... I hadn't got that far in my thinking, ma'am. Clara almost laughed. It surprised her. She had not laughed, not really, in 7 months. The sound got caught somewhere between her throat and her teeth, and came out as something closer to a cough. Mr. Cross? Yes, ma'am. Nobody is in trouble here. I am sewing. I will be sewing until 4 in the morning, and then I will be sleeping until 6, and then I will be sewing again. That is how I live now. please do not come to my window again." "No, ma'am, I won't." She heard him step off the porch. She heard his boots on the packed dirt. She heard the creak of saddle leather, and then after a moment she heard something she had not expected to hear. She heard him not ride away. "Mr. Cross?" "Ma'am?" "Why aren't you going?" "Wanted to make sure you got the bolt thrown on that door before I did." Clara sat very still. 7 months ago, Jonah Whitmore had gone out to fix a section of fence in the north pasture, and a horse had spooked at a rattler, and Jonah had come home on a wagon with his neck turned the wrong way, and in all the months since, not one man in Red Hollow had waited outside her door to make sure the bolt was thrown. Not the preacher, not the banker, not her husband's own cousin who lived 4 miles east and had inherited 2 of Jonah's best calves and none of his conscience. "The bolt is thrown," she said, though it was not. "Yes, ma'am. Good night." She listened to him ride, and when the sound of the hooves had faded all the way into the dark, Clara Whitmore stood up, walked to the door, and threw the bolt with a hand that against her every instruction to it was shaking. The next morning she went into town. She did not want to go. She had 3 shirts to finish and a pair of trousers to hem, and every hour not spent at her table was an hour she could not afford to lose. But Mrs. Baxter's $2.40 would not collect themselves, and the butcher would not hand over a 1/4 pound of salt pork to a woman who had nothing in her hand but promises. Red Hollow in the morning was a place that watched without turning its head. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore." "Morning, Mr. Teague." "Cold one." "They all are now." She did not stop walking. She knew the rhythm. She nodded. She kept her back straight. She did not let them see the mend at the elbow of her coat which she had done herself by lamplight, and which was good work, but was still a mend, and in a small town, a mend at a widow's elbow was a story before noon. Mrs. Baxter paid her in silver and a hard look. "You've been keeping well, Clara." "Well enough. Folks talk, you know." "Folks always talk, Mrs. Baxter." "A woman your age alone out there." "I am not alone. I have the work." "That's what I mean, dear. Work isn't company. Work is just work." Clara smiled the smile she had learned to smile. It did not reach her eyes because she did not let it. Her eyes were the last thing she still owned outright. "Thank you for the wages, ma'am. I'll have the next one done by Tuesday." She was halfway back to her wagon when she saw him. Ethan Cross across the street coming out of the feed store with a sack over his shoulder and his hat pulled low. He did not see her at first. Then he did, and he stopped, and for a breath of a moment Clara thought he might tip his hat and keep walking, because that was what decent men did when they had been told at midnight to stay away from a woman's window. He did not keep walking. He crossed the street. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Cross, I owe you an apology for last night." "You already gave one." "I'd like to give a better one, ma'am." "Mr. Cross, I have 17 cents in my pocket and 4 hours of daylight left. I do not have time for better apologies." "No, ma'am. Then maybe instead of an apology I could give you work." Clara's hand tightened on the reins of her wagon. "What kind of work?" He shifted the sack on his shoulder. She noticed, because she noticed everything about cloth, that the seam at the shoulder of his jacket had torn. Not a small tear, a long ragged one running from the collar almost down to the elbow. "I caught this on a nail," he said, as if he had seen her looking. "I cannot sew, ma'am. Everybody at the Carruthers place knows I cannot sew. I tried once with my sister's wedding veil when I was 12, and my sister said some words a little girl is not supposed to know, and I have not touched a needle since." "So you want it mended?" "I want it mended." "I charge 50 cents for a tear that long." "I'd pay $1. Clara looked at him. She looked for a long time. She looked the way a woman looks at a horse she is thinking of buying, trying to see the lameness before the seller can hide it. $1 is too much. Not for how long that tear is. $1 is too much, Mr. Cross, and you know it is. He met her eyes. He did not flinch. That was the thing she would think later. He did not flinch, and in a town full of men who could not meet a widow's eyes for fear of catching something from her, that alone was almost enough to make her trust him. Then charge me 50, he said, and keep the other 50 for the next time I tear something. Because I am a clumsy man, Mrs. Whitmore. I tear things often. Mr. Cross. Yes, ma'am. Are you trying to help me? No, ma'am. Are you sure about that? I am trying to pay for a mend. Anything else is your word, not mine. She took the jacket from him. She did not smile when she took it. She did not thank him. She folded it over her arm, the way she folded all the garments men brought her, and she said, Tuesday. Come Tuesday afternoon. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Cross. Ma'am. Do not come to my window again. If you have business at my house, come to my door in daylight like a man. Yes, ma'am. He tipped his hat, and he walked away, and Clara stood in the street with a torn jacket over her arm and a feeling in her chest she did not have a name for and did not want one. The bank sent its letter on Friday. She read it twice at her kitchen table because she had trained herself to read bad news twice so that the first reading could be denial and the second reading could be truth. Mrs. Whitmore. Pursuant to the loan undertaken by the late Jonah Whitmore against the property known as the Whitmore Homestead payment in the amount of $320 is due on or before the 1st of April. Failure to remit said payment shall result in, she stopped reading. $320. She had $41 and a jar of buttons. Jonah, she said, and the word came out of her like something she had to cough up. Jonah, what did you sign? The walls had no answer to that either. Clara folded the letter very carefully. She placed it inside the Bible on the shelf above her stove because that was where she kept the things she could not bear to look at more than once a month. Her mother's wedding ring was in there, a lock of her baby brother's hair from the summer of the fever, her own christening certificate, water-stained. And now this. She went back to her sewing table. She picked up Ethan Cross's torn jacket. She threaded her needle, and she did not think about the letter, and she did not think about the $320, and she did not think about the way Ethan Cross had looked at her in the street and not flinched. She thought about the stitches. That was how she survived now. Stitch by stitch, minute by minute. If she thought any further ahead than the next stitch, she would drown, and Clara Whitmore had decided on the afternoon her husband came home with his neck turned the wrong way that she was not going to drown. Not for the bank, not for the town, not for any man. At 10:15 that night, she heard a knock at her door. Not a window this time. A door. Firm. In daylight hours rhythm, though daylight was long gone. Who is it? Cross, ma'am. Mr. Cross, it is not Tuesday. No, ma'am, I know. She went to the door. She did not open it all the way. She opened it the width of her shoulder and no wider because a woman alone at 10 at night did not open a door all the way for any man no matter how steady his eyes. He was holding a basket. What is that? Eggs, ma'am, from the Carruthers. Mrs. Carruthers sent too many to town this week. They'd have gone bad. Mr. Cross, ma'am. Mrs. Carruthers does not know I exist. There was a pause then. Not a long one. Just long enough for Clara to know that he had been caught, and long enough for him to know that she had caught him, and long enough for both of them to decide what kind of people they were going to be about it. No, ma'am, he said. She does not. So these eggs are from you? Yes, ma'am. And you are bringing them to a woman who told you not to come to her house except on Tuesday? Yes, ma'am. Why? He looked at her for a long moment. Something passed across his face. Not pity. She would have slammed the door on pity. Something harder than pity. Something that looked almost like anger, though not at her. Because I heard in town this afternoon, he said that the bank has moved up your note, and I have known a lot of widows in my life, Mrs. Whitmore, and the ones who go under, they go under in the week after a letter like that. Not because they can't do the work, because they stop eating, because they stop sleeping, because they forget that a person cannot fight the bank and starve at the same time. Mr. Cross. Yes, ma'am. I did not ask for your eggs. No, ma'am, you didn't. I do not take charity. These aren't charity, Mrs. Whitmore. These are an advance. An advance on what? On the next jacket I tear. She looked at him. She looked at the basket. She looked at her own hand on the door, which was for the second time in a week, shaking against her every instruction. Mr. Cross. Ma'am? Do you have any idea what this town will say if a cowboy from the Carruthers Ranch is seen at my door at 10 at night with a basket of eggs? I have some idea, yes, ma'am. And you came anyway. I came anyway. Why? He set the basket down on the porch. He stepped back from it so that if she wanted to take it in, she could take it in without his hand being near hers. Because I saw you sewing last night, he said, and I saw the way your candle was burned down to almost nothing, and I saw that you did not stop stitching, even when you thought nobody was watching. And a woman who does not stop, Mrs. Whitmore, a woman who does not stop even in the dark, even when there is no one to see, that is a woman who is going to keep going until she breaks. And I have watched a lot of things in my life, ma'am, but I have not yet learned how to watch that. Clara did not say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice did not sound like her own. Take the basket back. Mrs. Whitmore, take the basket back, Mr. Cross. He bent. He picked up the basket. He did not argue. He did not plead. He turned to go. Mr. Cross. He stopped. Tuesday, she said. Afternoon, for the jacket. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Cross. Ma'am. If you bring eggs to my door again, I will not open it. Yes, ma'am. Do you understand me? Yes, ma'am, I understand you. He walked into the dark. She heard his horse. She heard him ride. She shut the door. She threw the bolt. And then Clara Whitmore, widow of Red Hollow, Montana, who had not wept in 7 months, who had not wept at the funeral, who had not wept at the reading of the will, who had not wept when the preacher's wife told her to remember that God had a plan. Clara Whitmore sat down on the floor of her own kitchen, with her back against the door, and she did not weep, not yet, because she was still too proud for that. But she pressed both her hands flat against the wood behind her, as if she could feel through the grain of it, the hoof prints of the horse carrying away the first man in 7 months, who had looked at her and not flinched. The candle on her sewing table was burning. She had 3 more shirts to finish before sunrise. She stood up. She went back to her needle. 145. 145 became 200 before the candle guttered, and 200 became sunrise, and sunrise became a Monday. Clara Whitmore moved through with her jaw set so tight she could hear her own teeth when she swallowed. By Tuesday morning, the town had already decided what to say. Clara, dear. Mrs. Baxter. I heard a thing last night I didn't want to hear. Then don't repeat it to me, ma'am. A cowboy was seen leaving your porch at 10 o'clock, Clara. A cowboy was seen leaving my porch carrying a basket, Mrs. Baxter. Leaving. Carrying. Because I did not let him set it down. Folks don't stop for the second half of a sentence, dear. Then folks are going to have to learn, aren't they? Mrs. Baxter set down the shirt she had come to collect. Her mouth moved in that slow, careful way women move their mouths when they are about to deliver something they have already rehearsed. Clara, I say this as a friend of your mother's. My mother has been dead 11 years, Mrs. Baxter. Which is why I say it. A widow who takes help too soon stops being a widow and becomes something else, and what she becomes is not something a decent town keeps at its table. Mrs. Baxter. Yes, dear. Your shirt is ready. It is $2.40. I would like to be paid, please, and I would like you to leave my house. Clara. Now, ma'am. The silver came out onto the table in a small, reluctant stack. Mrs. Baxter gathered her shirt. She turned at the door. She opened her mouth one more time, and Clara, who had not raised her voice in 7 months, raised it then. Out, Mrs. Baxter. The door closed. Clara stood in her kitchen with her hands flat on the table, breathing like a woman who had run a mile, and the $2.40 sat there looking smaller than it had looked a minute before. She did not cry. She did not sit down. She went back to the jacket. Ethan Cross's jacket was a blue wool coat with a tear at the shoulder, and a smell to it that was not unpleasant. Leather horse, cold air, wood smoke, the smell of a man who worked outdoors and did not apologize for it. She laid it out flat on her table, and she ran her fingers along the seam, the way she ran her fingers along every seam to feel where the cloth would forgive her and where it would not. At the inside of the lining where nobody but a seamstress would ever look, her fingers stopped. A patch. Not a tear patched. A small square of cloth sewn deliberately into the lining, the way a man sews a pocket for something he does not want anyone to know he carries. Clara's fingers felt the shape of what was inside. Paper. She pulled her hand back as if she had touched a stove. "That is not yours to open, Clara Whitmore." She said it out loud in her own kitchen to herself, because sometimes a woman alone had to be her own conscience. She picked up her needle. She began to stitch the shoulder tear. She did not look at the lining. She did not let herself look at the lining. She counted because counting was what she did when her mind wanted to wander into places it should not wander. 1, 2, 3, 4. At 50 stitches she heard the horse. He came at noon, exactly as she had told him to. He knocked at the door, not the window. He took off his hat before she opened, though she could not see him take it off because she could feel the pause on the other side of the door where a man takes off his hat. "Mr. Cross?" "Mrs. Whitmore." "Your jacket is finished. 50 cents, please." He gave her the 50 cents. She gave him the jacket. The exchange took less than 10 seconds, and in those 10 seconds, Clara Whitmore did not look him in the eye, because she had decided on the walk from the sewing table to the door that she was not going to look him in the eye, because a woman who looked a man in the eye twice in 1 week was a woman who had already begun to let him stay. "Thank you, ma'am." "You are welcome, Mr. Cross. Good day." "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Cross, I said good day." "Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to ask one thing." "What?" "Did you find it?" Her hand, which had been closing the door, stopped. "Find what, Mr. Cross?" "Whatever is in the lining, ma'am." She did not answer. He did not press her. He stood there in the doorway with his hat in his hand and his mended jacket folded over his arm, and he waited for her the way a man waits for a deer. He has spent a long morning tracking patient, still unwilling to startle her into the woods. "I felt it," she said finally. "I did not read it. I did not expect you to read it. I expected you to feel it because you are the only person in this town who puts a hand on the inside of a coat, and I was counting on that." "Mr. Cross." "Ma'am." "What is in the lining?" "A note, Mrs. Whitmore, written by your husband." The floor of her kitchen tilted. It did not tilt visibly. It tilted inside her the way a ship tilts in the dark when a wave comes in from a direction nobody is watching for. "Say that again." "A note written by your husband, ma'am, Jonah Whitmore, dated the 2nd of August last year, 2 weeks before he died." "Mr. Cross, if this is a trick—" "It is not a trick, Mrs. Whitmore. If this is some swindle you have cooked up to get into my house, I swear to you on the grave of my mother." "Mrs. Whitmore, open the lining, read the note, then decide what I am." She stepped back from the door. She did not invite him in. She did not tell him to leave. She walked back to the sewing table. She picked up her scissors, which were still dull. She opened the lining with 3 careful cuts. She slid the folded paper out. She knew the handwriting before she unfolded it. Jonah's handwriting was the first handwriting she had ever loved. It was the handwriting of the letters he had sent her when he was courting her, and the handwriting on the deed of this house, and the handwriting on the note pinned to the barn door on the morning he went out to the north pasture, which had said only back by supper, and which had been the last thing her husband ever wrote her. This note was longer. "Ethan, if you are reading this, then I am not, and I am sorry for that. You are the only man I know who does not want something. If she will let you see that she does not carry it alone. The debt is not what she thinks. Look in the tin box under the floor of the east barn, 3rd board from the door. J.W." Clara read it twice. Then she read it a 3rd time because the first 2 times her eyes had not been working properly. "Mr. Cross?" "Ma'am." "Come inside, please. Close the door behind you." He came in. He did not sit. He stood where she pointed near the stove, and he held his hat in his 2 hands in front of his waist, the way a man holds his hat at a funeral. "Mr. Cross, did you know my husband?" "Yes, ma'am." "How did you know my husband?" He pulled me out of a river 2 winters back, Mrs. Whitmore. Yellowstone up near Livingston. My horse went through the ice. Jonah was passing the road, and he came down the bank, and he got a rope around my chest, and he hauled me out, and he put me in front of his fire for 2 days, and he did not ask my name until the 3rd morning. I owed him my life, ma'am. Owed, present tense. A debt like that does not close when the man dies. It transfers. To me. To you, Mrs. Whitmore. So when you came to my window that night, I came to your window that night because I had been looking for a way to come to your door for 3 weeks, and I could not find one because every man in this town had already told me a respectable widow does not want a stranger knocking. The candle gave me an excuse. The jacket gave me a second one. The eggs were me losing my patience. Mr. Cross. Yes, ma'am. You have been lying to me. No, ma'am. I have been waiting for you to ask. That is a thin difference. Yes, ma'am, it is, but it is the only difference I had. Clara set the note down on the table. She set it down very carefully, the way a woman sets down the last piece of something fragile. She put her hand on the back of the chair. Her knuckles went white. Jonah said the debt is not what I think. Yes, ma'am. The bank says $320 on the 1st of April. Yes, ma'am. What is in the tin box, Mr. Cross? I have not looked, Mrs. Whitmore. Why not? Because your husband wrote that note to me, not the box. The box he wrote to you. She looked at him then. She looked for a long moment, and what she saw in his face was not the face of a man who wanted something. It was the face of a man who had been carrying a weight for 7 months, and had finally been given permission to set it down, and who was even now not sure he had been given enough permission to set all of it down at once. Come with me, she said. They walked to the east barn. He did not offer her his arm. She did not ask for it. When they got to the 3rd board from the door, she took the crowbar herself, because she was not going to let a man lift the board that her husband had told her through the ink of his own hand to lift alone, or not alone, but with this man who was not alone anymore either. The board came up. There was a tin box. Inside the tin box, there was money, not enough to pay the bank, but more than she had expected. Perhaps $80 in coin and small paper, and there was a folded piece of paper that was a deed, and the deed was not to her house. It was to 40 acres of grazing land 2 miles north. 40 acres of grazing land that she did not know her husband had owned. Mr. Cross. Ma'am. Jonah owned this. I don't know, ma'am. I don't know a thing about this piece of land. But if it's in his name and he left the deed to you, then it's yours. 40 acres, Mr. Cross. 40 acres is more than $320 if I can sell it. 40 acres is my house back. Yes, ma'am. It might be. It might be. Land is only worth what a man will pay for it, Mrs. Whitmore. And in this county, with drought coming, and the railroad still arguing about where to put the line, there are not many men buying. There is one. Ma'am? Colton Reed. She said the name, and his face changed. Not much. Just a small tightening at the corner of the jaw, the way a man's face changes when a wasp has landed somewhere on his skin, and he does not yet want to move. Mr. Reed, Ethan said slowly, is the man who has been moving his fences a little further west every month for the last 3 years. Is he the one who owns the land next to these 40 acres? He is the one who owns the land all around these 40 acres, Mr. Cross? Mrs. Whitmore. Yes. That is not good news. That is the worst news I have heard this year. Because if Jonah bought those 40 acres and Colton Reed did not, then Colton Reed wanted them. And a man like Colton Reed does not want a piece of land for 3 years, and then let a widow sell it to somebody else for the asking price. Clara folded the deed. She folded the note. She put both of them inside the Bible on the shelf above her stove, next to the letter from the bank, and her mother's ring, and her brother's hair. She turned to face him. Mr. Cross. Yes, ma'am. I have a question for you, and I want a true answer. Yes, ma'am. Are you afraid of Colton Reed? He did not answer quickly. She respected that. A man who answers that question quickly is either a liar or a fool, and Clara Whitmore had lost her appetite for both. "Yes, ma'am," he said finally. "I am afraid of him. Any man with sense is. He has 6 men who ride for him, and 3 of them have killed before, and 1 of them has killed twice. I am afraid of him the way a sensible man is afraid of a bad storm. It does not mean I am going to run inside." "Mr. Cross." "Ma'am." "Will you teach me to shoot a rifle?" "Jonah never taught you." "Jonah taught me the pistol. He said the rifle was a man's work and he would always be there to do it." "Jonah was wrong about a lot of things, Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes, Mr. Cross, he was. I will teach you the rifle. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow." They walked back to the house. She did not offer him coffee because she did not have coffee. She offered him water, which he accepted. He drank it standing. He set the cup down. He was almost out the door when the knock came. It was not a polite knock. It was the knock of a fist that has been used to knocking on doors that do not want to open. Clara froze. Ethan Cross moved between her and the door before she had finished taking a breath. He did not draw the pistol at his hip. He put his hand on the handle quiet ready, and he said to her, not turning his head, "Who is expected?" "No one." "Who is unexpected and dangerous?" "One man." "His name?" "Colton Reed's foreman, Silas Pike." "Is he alone?" "I don't know." Mrs. Whitmore stepped back from the door, into the kitchen, behind the stove. "Mr. Cross, it is my house." "Yes, ma'am." "And in 1 minute it will be your house again. For 1 minute please let it be mine." She stepped back. He opened the door. A voice came through it that Clara knew too well, the voice of a man who had stood in her yard 3 weeks after Jonah's funeral and offered her 40 cents on the dollar for her land, and who had smiled the whole time he was doing it. "Well now," said Silas Pike. "Didn't know the widow had company." "Didn't know the widow was taking callers," said Ethan. "And who might you be, friend?" "Not your friend." "That's so. That's so." There was a silence then, the kind of silence that comes between 2 men who are each measuring how fast the other can move. "Mr. Reed sent me with a word for Mrs. Whitmore." "You can leave the word with me." "Mr. Reed's word is for the lady. The lady is busy. She'll want to hear this one." Clara stepped forward before Ethan could stop her. She came up behind his shoulder, not past it, because she had learned something in the last 10 minutes that she had not known an hour before, which was that there were some doors a widow did not walk through alone if she did not have to. "I am here, Mr. Pike. Say your word." Silas Pike's eyes slid from Ethan's face to hers and back again. He smiled the smile that made a woman want to wash her face. "Mr. Reed has heard a rumor, ma'am." "Has he?" "That you have come into possession of a certain deed." The floor tilted again. Clara held herself still. She did not let her face move. "What deed, Mr. Pike?" 40 acres, ma'am, north of here. Mr. Reed would like to make you an offer before the bank takes it instead." "The bank is not taking anything of mine, Mr. Pike." "No, that is not the word in town. The word in town is wrong. Mr. Reed is prepared to offer you $200 for the parcel, cash, today, before the 1st of April. The parcel is worth $600. The parcel is worth what a man will pay for it, ma'am, and right now the only man offering is Mr. Reed." "Then the only man offering can offer more." Silas Pike's smile did not change, but something in his eyes did. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Pike, I am going to tell Mr. Reed that you said no. You do that. Mr. Reed does not take no well. Mr. Reed is going to have to learn." "Mrs. Whitmore, that is not a threat. That is a weather report." "Then I have my coat, Mr. Pike. Good day." Ethan did not close the door until Silas Pike had mounted his horse and ridden out past the gate. Then he closed it. Then he threw the bolt. Then he turned to Clara, and for the first time since she had met him, there was something in his face that was not patience. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes, in 3 days that man is going to come back, and he is not going to come back alone." "Yes?" And when he comes back, he is going to do something that cannot be undone. Yes. Do you still want the rifle lesson tomorrow, Mr. Cross? Ma'am? I want the rifle lesson tonight. He looked at her. Not the way a man looks at a woman he pities. Not the way a man looks at a woman he wants. The way a man looks at a partner who has just told him the work is starting an hour sooner than either of them had hoped. Yes, ma'am, he said, tonight. And Clara Whitmore, who that morning had been counting stitches in the dark, picked up her husband's note from the shelf above her stove, read it one more time, and put it in the pocket over her heart, where for the first time in 7 months she could feel something beating back against the paper. The paper against her heart was still warm from her own body when Ethan Cross put the rifle in her hands for the first time. Hold it like you mean to keep it, Mrs. Whitmore, not like you are apologizing for it. It's heavier than the pistol. It's heavier than a pistol because it's going to do more work than a pistol. A pistol is a door you close. A rifle is a door you hold. Mr. Cross, that is a very long sentence for a cowboy. I read, ma'am. It is one of my failings. She almost smiled. She did not let herself. She settled the stock against her shoulder the way he showed her, and she squinted down the barrel at a fence post 40 paces off, and she thought of Silas Pike's smile, and she pulled the trigger. The kick knocked her back half a step. The shot went wide. The fence post did not know it had been aimed at. Again. Mr. Cross, I missed. Yes, ma'am, again. I wasted a bullet. You wasted a bullet you can afford to waste. The one you cannot afford to waste is the one that is coming in 3 days. Again. She fired again. She fired a third time. On the fourth shot, the fence post jumped, and a splinter of pine sang off into the dark, and Clara Whitmore, who that morning had been a seamstress with $41 and a jar of buttons, lowered the rifle and said very quietly, I want to do that again. Yes, ma'am. That is the sound of a woman who is going to keep her house. They worked until the box of cartridges was half empty and her shoulder was going to be purple by morning. He did not touch her. Not once. He corrected her stance with his words, not his hands, and Clara noticed it, because a man who does not touch a woman, when he has every excuse to, is a man who has decided something about himself long before he met her. Mr. Cross. Ma'am, why are you not touching my arm to show me? Because you did not ask me to, ma'am. Most men would not wait to be asked. Yes, ma'am. I know. That is why I am not most men. She lowered the rifle. She looked at him over the stock of it in the thin light from the kitchen window, and she said the first thing she had said in 7 months that she had not first rehearsed. Thank you. For the lesson. For waiting to be asked. He did not answer that. He took the rifle from her hands. He began to clean it the way a man cleans a tool he intends to use again. She went inside. She put coffee on the stove. Even though she did not have coffee, she had chicory, which she ground with the heel of her hand in a cloth because her grinder had broken in November. She poured 2 cups. She brought them out. He took one. Mrs. Whitmore. Yes. Colton Reed is going to try something tomorrow. Not in 3 days. Tomorrow. Why tomorrow? Because Silas Pike was a message. The message was, we know, and a man who sends that message does not wait for the widow to sleep on it. What will he try? Not men at your door, not yet. He wants the land clean, and a dead widow is a slow kind of clean. He will try to take something from you that you will have to chase. The horses. The horses, or the well, or the barn. The barn has the last of the feed. Then it will be the barn. She drank her chicory. It was bitter. She had forgotten to put sugar in it, and she did not have sugar anyway. Mr. Cross. Ma'am? Tomorrow night I want you in the east barn. Yes, ma'am. With the rifle. Yes, ma'am. And I want to be there with you. Mrs. Whitmore. I want to be there with you, Mr. Cross. He looked at her for a long moment. She watched him run the argument through his head and watched him set it down on the other side of him unspoken, because he had already learned in 2 days what most men never learn, that a widow who has begun to breathe does not thank a man for trying to take her breath back. Yes, ma'am. He left before midnight. He rode back to the Carruthers place because he had work in the morning, and because he had decided without telling her that he was going to quit that work by sunset, and he wanted to quit it properly, with notice, not the way a man walks out on a thing he no longer cares about. Clara did not sleep that night. She sat at her table and she sewed because sewing was the one thing her hands knew how to do when her mind would not be still. And she thought about the note in the lining of Ethan's jacket, and she thought about the 40 acres, and she thought about Jonah who had bought land. He never told her about from a man he must have known. Wanted it, and she wondered for the first time whether her husband had died on a horse that spooked at a rattler, or whether her husband had died for a different reason, and the rattler had been a convenience somebody else had arranged. She pushed that thought away. She was not ready for it. She stitched until dawn. At 8:15 the next morning, the first thing that went wrong. The banker came. Mr. Harlan Boyd did not usually leave his office for a debt not yet due. He did that morning. He rode up in a black coat on a black mare, and he knocked on her door the way a man knocks when he has already decided he has the right to come in. Mrs. Whitmore. Mr. Boyd. May I step inside? You may say what you have come to say from where you are standing, Mr. Boyd. He did not like that. His mouth did the thing men's mouths did when a widow refused a small courtesy. But he had not ridden out from town to turn around on a porch, and they both knew it. Mrs. Whitmore, I am afraid the note has been called early. The note is due on the 1st of April, Mr. Boyd. The note has been called early, Mrs. Whitmore, by the holder of the note. You are the holder of the note, Mr. Boyd. I was the holder of the note. The note has been purchased. The floor of her porch did not tilt this time. It dropped, straight down. She felt it in her knees. Purchased by whom? I am not at liberty to say, ma'am. Mr. Boyd, if you stand on my porch and tell me my husband's debt has been bought by a man you will not name, I swear to you, I will know his name before sundown, and every soul in this town will know you would not tell me. Mrs. Whitmore? His name, Mr. Boyd. Mr. Colton Reed. She did not say anything for a long moment. She had known. She had known before he had finished the first sentence. But hearing it was different. Hearing it was the sound of a trap she had been walking toward for 3 weeks, finally shutting behind her. When is the note due now, Mr. Boyd? 7 days, Mrs. Whitmore, paid in full, or the property reverts. 7 days. 7 days. Mr. Boyd, you have known me since I was 14. Yes, ma'am. You stood at my wedding. Yes, ma'am. And you sold my husband's debt to the man who wants my land. Mrs. Whitmore, it is business. Mr. Boyd, you are going to look at your own face in a shaving mirror tomorrow, and I want you to remember while you are looking that a woman you have known for 11 years asked you one question this morning, and the answer was business. He did not answer. He did not have an answer. He touched his hat, and he mounted his black mare, and he rode back to town, and Clara Whitmore stood on her porch with her arms crossed over her chest, and watched him go until he was a speck, because she did not want him to turn in the saddle and see her sit down. She sat down after he was a speck. She put her head in her hands. She did not cry. She had still not cried. But her shoulders shook for 3 breaths, and she counted the 3 breaths, the way she counted stitches, and then she stood up again, because there was no one in this house who was going to stand up for her if she did not. Ethan came at noon. He came with a bedroll tied behind his saddle and a rifle in the scabbard, and a look on his face that told her before he said a word that he had quit the Carruthers place. Mr. Cross? Mrs. Whitmore, you brought your bed. Yes, ma'am. Where do you intend to sleep it? In the east barn, ma'am, if you will let me. Mr. Cross, you cannot sleep in my barn. I can, ma'am. A barn is a roof. A roof is not a house. If I sleep in the barn, no man in this town can say a word about your door. They will say words anyway. Yes, ma'am, they will, but a true word is harder to throw than a false one, and if they throw a false one, we will know it, because we will know it is false. She looked at him. She did not nod. She did not say yes. She stepped back from the door, which was the same thing as saying yes, and he understood it because he had learned in 4 days how to understand her. She told him about Boyd. He did not interrupt. He let her say the whole of it. When she was finished, he stood very still for a long moment, and then he said something she did not expect. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ride into town." "Why?" "Because there is a man there who owes me a favor, and today is the day I am collecting it." "Who?" "The telegraph clerk. Eben Marsh. I pulled him out of a saloon fight in Bozeman last spring. He has not forgotten." "What favor?" "I want to see every wire Colton Reed has sent in the last 6 months." "Mr. Cross, that is not legal." "No, ma'am, it is not. But a man who has bought my landlord's widow's debt is not a man who is holding himself to law either, and if we are going to meet him on the field, he has chosen we cannot be the only 2 souls on it still tying our boots." "Go." "I will be back by dark." "Go." He went. She spent the afternoon counting. She counted the money in the tin box. She counted the money in her pocket. She counted the worth of her horses, her wagon, her tools, her dishes, her dead husband's pocket watch. She counted, and every count came out the same short. Short by nearly $200, even if she sold the horses, even if she sold the wagon, even if she walked out of this house with nothing but the dress on her back. She did not cry. She sewed. She was on the 41st stitch of a tablecloth nobody had ordered when she heard the first crack. It was not a shot. It was wood. It was a long, slow splitting sound, the kind a beam makes when a man with a pry bar has decided a barn door is not going to be a barn door anymore. She stood up so fast her chair went over. She did not take the pistol. She took the rifle. She loaded it with hands that did not shake because her hands had gone past shaking into something. Past shaking into the steady cold that a woman enters when she understands the arithmetic of a night has changed. She did not light a lantern. She went out the back door. The east barn was 100 paces from the house. She crossed the paces at a crouch, the rifle across her forearms, her breath small and shallow. She could hear them before she saw them. 2 men, maybe 3. A horse snuffing. The low muttered cursing of a man trying to be quiet and failing. "Gets the feed out first, then we fire it." Pike said make it look like sparks from the stove. "Stove is 50 feet from the barn, idiot." "You tell Pike he's an idiot." She knelt behind the rain barrel at the corner of the tack shed. She settled the rifle on the rim. She counted 3 figures, 2 inside the barn, 1 holding horses outside, 1 woman, 3 men. A rifle she had fired 6 times in her life. Her finger did not leave the trigger guard. "Think, Clara. Think before you shoot." She said it to herself inside her head in Ethan's voice, because it was the voice she had been listening to all afternoon. If she fired, she would hit 1 maybe. The other 2 would kill her, and her house, and her 40 acres, and her husband's name would belong to Colton Reed by morning. If she did not fire, the barn burned, and she had nothing to feed a horse with for the next month, and she lost the bank deadline anyway. She had a third choice. She had not seen it at first, because fear does not show a woman all her choices at once. She crept backward, back to the house. In the house, to the shelf above the stove, to the Bible, to the letter from the bank. She tore off the corner of the letter. On the back of it, in the dark, with a pencil stub, she wrote 4 words. Reed's Men. East Barn. Now. She went to the front door. She opened it. She stepped out onto the porch. She fired 1 round from the rifle straight up into the sky, because a single shot at midnight on the plains of Montana travels 4 miles, and there were 3 homesteads within 4 miles, and one of them belonged to Tom Riley, whose brother had been hanged by Colton Reed's men 2 years back on a charge nobody in the county believed. She fired again. She fired a 3rd time. Then she stood on her porch, with the rifle across her chest, and she waited. The men in the barn came out at a run. They came out because 3 shots at midnight was not what they had been paid to walk into. Who fired that? The widow. She's on the porch there, look. Pike said she'd be asleep. Pike was wrong. She raised the rifle. She did not aim to kill. She aimed at the ground 6 feet in front of their horses, and she fired once, and the horses went sideways, and one of the men went off his saddle into the dirt. "Get off my land." Her voice did not shake. She did not recognize it. It was the voice of a woman she had not met yet. "Get off my land, or I swear on my husband's grave the next one is your belly." They got on their horses. The one who had gone off got on behind another. They rode. They rode west toward the reed place. They would hear a woman who was not going to sell. She stood on the porch until the dust settled. She stood until she heard another horse coming from the east fast, and then she almost raised the rifle again before she recognized the rhythm of it, because a woman learns a horse the way she learns a man in the first week. Ethan came off the saddle before the horse had stopped. "Clara." He had not called her Clara before. He did not notice he had. She did. "I'm all right." "Clara." "I said I'm all right, Mr. Cross. 3 of them. Gone. I fired over them." He crossed the porch. He stopped 2 feet from her. He did not touch her. His chest was rising and falling the way a man's chest rises and falls after he has ridden a horse half to death. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Is the barn?" "Standing." They did not have time. "Clara." "I'm all right, Ethan." That was the first time she had said his name. He closed his eyes for one breath. When he opened them, his voice was steadier, but not by much. "I have the wires." "What do they say?" "They say, Mrs. Whitmore, that your husband did not die from a horse." The rifle lowered. Her hand went to the porch rail. Her knuckles found the splinter she had known was there for 6 months. "Say that again, Mr. Cross." "Jonah sent a wire on the 1st of August last year, to a land office in Helena. He was asking a question about a survey on your 40 acres, about a mineral right." "A mineral right." "Copper, Clara. There is a copper vein on your 40 acres. The splinter went into her thumb. She did not feel it. And Colton Reed knew. Colton Reed sent a wire on the 5th of August to a man in Butte, asking how fast a claim could be blocked if the man who held it were to his word, Clara, become unavailable. The world was very quiet for one long second. Then Clara Whitmore said very softly to no one, and to everyone, and to her dead husband, and to the God she had stopped believing in 7 months ago, he was murdered. "Yes, ma'am, I believe he was." "Colton Reed had my husband murdered for 40 acres of copper." "Yes, ma'am." "Mr. Cross." "Clara, we are not going to lose this house." "No, ma'am, we are not. And we are not going to let that man sleep another easy night in the state of Montana." "No, ma'am." She turned. She walked back into the house. She set the rifle on the table where the sewing had been. She picked up the tablecloth nobody had ordered. She folded it very neatly and she put it away. Then she sat down at the table across from the man who had come to her window 4 nights ago, and not flinched, and she said the first thing she had said in her whole life that she did not take back. "Tell me everything you know about copper." "Copper is a slow word, Clara. It does not ring like gold. It does not sing like silver. It sits in the ground and it waits. But a vein on 40 acres, if it runs the way the survey and Reed's wire suggests it runs, that is not a farmer's fortune. That is a railroad's fortune." "Say a number, Mr. Cross." "Clara, say a number." $20,000, maybe 40. Maybe more if the vein holds past the creek line. She set both her hands flat on the table. She did not speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was the voice of a woman who had finally understood the shape of the room she had been standing in for 7 months. "Jonah did not die from a horse." "No, ma'am." "Jonah died because he found copper." "Yes, ma'am." "And the man who killed him is holding my debt." "Yes, ma'am." "And in 7 days, that man is going to walk up onto this porch with a piece of paper from my own bank, and he is going to take the land my husband died for because my husband did not tell me what he had found." "Clara, yes. Your husband did not tell you because he was not sure yet. The wire to Helena was a question, not an answer. He was waiting for the survey to come back. It came back on the 8th of August. He died on the 12th. 4 days. 4 days, Clara. 4 days was all the warning he had." "Yes, ma'am." She stood up. She walked to the shelf above the stove. She took down the Bible. She opened it to the letter, to the note, to the deed to her mother's ring and her brother's hair, and the small stack of things that had been until 4 days ago the sum of everything she had left of the life she used to live. She did not cry. She had still not cried. She closed the Bible and she held it against her chest for the length of one long breath. Mr. Cross. Clara. Tomorrow at first light I want you to ride to Tom Riley's. Yes, ma'am. Tell him what the wires say. Tell him Jonah was murdered. Tell him the same man who hanged his brother is the man who is now coming for me. He will come, Clara. I am not asking him to come for me. I am asking him to come because there are families in this county who have been waiting 2 years to say the name Colton Reed in a room where Colton Reed cannot put his hand over their mouth. Yes, ma'am. And Mr. Cross. Clara. Take the wires with you, not copies, the originals. I want Tom Riley to see Eben Marsh's handwriting on them. I want him to know this is not a widow's grief. This is a man's crime. Yes, Clara. He slept in the barn that night. She did not sleep at all. She sat in her kitchen with the rifle across her knees and the Bible on the table in front of her. And when the sun came up, she stood and she went outside and she told him goodbye at the gate. The way a woman tells a partner goodbye, not with a touch, not with a word longer than it needed to be, but with a look that said, "Come back," and with a second look that said, "I know you will." He rode. She went back to her needle because there was work, and the work did not stop for murder or copper or widows on the brink of everything. She sewed 2 shirts and a pair of trousers before noon. At noon, she heard a horse again, and for one breath, she thought it was Ethan back early, and then she recognized it was not because the rhythm was wrong, and the rhythm of a man coming in peace is not the rhythm of a man coming in something else. It was not Silas Pike this time. It was Colton Reed himself. She saw him through the window, and her hand went to the rifle before her mind caught up to her hand. He was a tall man in his 50s with a gray mustache and a black coat cut in town, and a way of sitting a horse that said, "This is my county, and I am merely visiting it." He did not come alone. 2 men rode with him, one to each shoulder, and one of them was Silas Pike, and the other one was a man Clara did not know, a man with a scar at his jaw and a rifle across his pommel. She did not go to the door. She opened the window 3 inches. She spoke through the gap. "Mr. Reed?" "Mrs. Whitmore, I would like a word." "You may say it from your saddle." "Inside would be more civil." "Mr. Reed, I know what you did to my husband, and I am holding a rifle I have learned to use since we last spoke. And if you set one boot on my porch, I am going to fire it through the door, and I am going to tell every soul who comes to see the hole that you threatened a widow, and the hole itself will testify that I am not lying. Say your word from your saddle, sir, or turn your horse." His face did not change. A man like Colton Reed had not built what he had built by letting his face change at a widow's window. But his hand, which had been resting on the pommel of his saddle, moved. Just an inch, just enough. "You are mistaken about your husband, Mrs. Whitmore." "No, Mr. Reed, I am not." A horse threw him. A horse that had not thrown a rider in 9 years threw him, Mr. Reed, 4 days after my husband's survey came back positive for copper on the 40 acres you had been trying to buy for 3 years. That is not a mistake. That is a coincidence only a dead woman would believe. Mrs. Whitmore, say your word, Mr. Reed, or ride. $320. Say it clearly, sir. The note on this property, Mrs. Whitmore. I am calling it today, not in 7 days. Today. I am standing on your land with the paper in my coat pocket, and I am telling you, as is my legal right, that if you do not produce $320 in the next hour, the property reverts, and you will be off it by sundown. The rifle in her hand got heavier by a pound. Her throat went dry. Her knees, she felt them. Her knees almost went. But she did not let him see them. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Whitmore, you are bluffing. I am not, ma'am. You are bluffing because if you had the legal right to do what you are saying, you would have brought the sheriff, and you have not brought the sheriff. You have brought 2 men with rifles. A man with the law on his side brings the law. A man without it brings hired guns. The sheriff is 3 hours away, ma'am. The sheriff is 3 hours away because you have not sent for him. And you have not sent for him because you know what my husband's wire on the 1st of August said, and you know what yours on the 5th said, and you know that if the sheriff stood on this porch today and asked me a single question, the answer would hang you." She did not know if this was true. She thought it was. She said it like it was. For the first time since she had met the man, Colton Reed's face changed. Not much. Just at this corner of the eye. Just a flicker. But a woman who has been watching men flinch for 7 months knows a flinch when she sees it, and Clara Whitmore had just watched Colton Reed flinch in his saddle. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Reed, you do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying, sir. And I know that I am not the only person in this county who knows it, because the wires have left this house, and the man who rode out with them this morning is not a man your foreman is going to catch on an open road." That was when Silas Pike's hand moved, not to his pistol, to his reins. He turned his horse. He said low to Colton Reed, "Boss." "Quiet, Silas." "Boss, if she has the wires." "Quiet, Silas." But it was too late. A hired man who has had to say boss twice in a single minute on another man's porch is a hired man who has just learned that he is working for a man who is losing, and Clara saw it, and Colton Reed saw that she saw it, and for one long, brilliant, terrifying second, the whole arithmetic of the morning turned over in Clara Whitmore's favor. Then it turned back. Because Colton Reed was not a man who left a porch he had come to claim, and a man like that, when cornered, does not ride off. He does something else. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Reed." "I will give you until sundown." "I said an hour." "I am giving you until sundown, as a courtesy." "Mr. Reed, a courtesy from you is a threat in a nicer hat." "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, it is." He turned his horse. The 3 of them rode out past her gate. Silas Pike looked back once, and Clara, still at the window, still with the rifle, met his eyes, and she did not look away, and he was the one who broke the look first. She sat down on the kitchen floor for the second time in a week. This time her hands were shaking. Not a little, a lot. She put the rifle down because she could not trust her finger on the guard. She pressed her palms against the floorboards. She breathed. She counted. She got to 20. She stood up. She went back to the window. She did not sew. She watched the road. She watched the road for 3 hours, and at the end of the 3rd hour she saw smoke, not from the east, from the north, from the 40 acres. No, she said it out loud, to the empty house, to Jonah, to a God she had not spoken to in 7 months. No, no. She saddled the horse herself. She had not saddled a horse alone since the week after the funeral. Her hands remembered. She rode. She rode the 2 miles at a pace that would have killed a lesser animal, and when she came up over the rise and saw what they had done, she pulled up so hard the horse almost sat down. The survey stake was gone. Every corner stake was gone. The small sod hut Jonah had built as a claim marker was burning, not a house, not a home, but the one physical thing on those 40 acres that said, a man lived here and worked here and owned here, and it was going up in a black pillar of smoke that would be visible from the Carruthers Ranch and from the bank in town and from the porch of Colton Reed's own damned house. No stakes, no hut, no marker. In the eyes of any judge who had not seen the deed in her Bible, those 40 acres were unclaimed land. "You son of a bitch." She said it to the smoke. She said it to the man she was sure was standing at his own window 4 miles away, watching the same smoke and smiling. "You think burning the stakes makes it yours." She turned the horse. She rode back harder than she had come. Halfway home she saw another rider coming from the south, and her hand went to the rifle in her saddle scabbard. And then she saw it was Ethan, and she did not lower her hand right away, because her hand was not listening to her anymore. "Clara." "They burned the claim hut. I saw the smoke from Riley's." "Ethan, they burned the stakes, every stake. The deed in my Bible is a piece of paper. On the land there is nothing left that says it was ever ours." "Clara, listen to me." "Ethan, listen to me. Tom Riley is coming. He is bringing his 2 brothers and 4 men from the Lazy M who have been waiting 2 years for a reason. The wires are already on their way to the federal marshal in Helena, a Marshal Clara. Not the sheriff. Reed owns the sheriff. He does not own Helena. Ethan, it will take days. Yes, ma'am, it will. We do not have days. We have until sundown. Then we do not let them put us off this land by sundown. Ethan, there will be 10 of them. Maybe 12. There are 2 of us. Clara. Ethan, I have fired a rifle 6 times in my life. Clara, listen. I cannot shoot 10 men, Ethan Cross. Clara, stop. She stopped. They were both on horseback on the road between the 40 acres and her house, with the black smoke still climbing the sky behind them, and he leaned across from his saddle, and for the first time since she had met him, he put his hand on her arm. It was not a grab. It was not a claim. It was the flat, steady weight of a man who is telling another human being, I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Clara, listen to me very carefully. We are not going to shoot 10 men. Then what? We are going to make 10 men not want to shoot us. There is a difference. Ethan, Tom Riley is not bringing guns, Clara. Tom Riley is bringing witnesses. She looked at him. Witnesses. 7 men, Clara. 7 men from 7 homesteads. Men who will stand on your porch at sundown in broad daylight with their hats off and their hands empty. If Colton Reed wants to put a widow off her land, he will have to do it in front of 7 neighbors and 1 cowboy who quit his job yesterday. And he will have to do it with the federal marshal already on the wire. And he will have to do it knowing that every one of those men will ride to Helena the next morning and swear to what they saw. Ethan, he will still do it. He might, but he will not do it clean. And a man like Colton Reed does not survive dirty. He survives clean. The day he stops being clean is the day the county stops letting him buy its sheriff. You are betting my house on that. No, ma'am. I am betting my life on it. You are betting your house on it. I am not asking you to. If you tell me to ride to Helena myself right now and leave you, I will ride and you will run, and we will meet in a town I have not picked yet, and we will live. Ethan. Yes. I am not running. I know, ma'am, but I had to say it. A man who does not give a woman the choice is not a partner. He is a warden. She looked at him for a long moment. His hand was still on her arm. She did not move her arm. Ethan Cross. Clara. When this is over. Yes. I have something I want to say to you. Yes, ma'am. Not now. No, ma'am. When this is over. Yes, Clara. They rode back to the house. They did not hurry. They rode side by side because a woman and a man who have just made a choice together do not ride single file. The neighbors came at 4. Tom Riley was first. He was a thin man, weathered with a brother's blood in his jaw, and a hat he did not take off until he was inside her gate. His 2 brothers rode behind him. The 4 men from the Lazy M came in at 1:15. One of them was a man Clara had gone to church with as a girl. One of them was the father of a child her husband had once pulled out of a creek. None of them carried rifles. That was the thing. None of them carried rifles. They carried themselves, their names, their faces, their willingness to stand in one place and watch. And Clara Whitmore, who that morning had believed she was alone in the state of Montana, understood for the first time what Ethan had meant when he had said witnesses. She stood on her porch. She did not invite them up. They did not come up. They stood in her yard in a loose line, 7 men with their hats in their hands, and Tom Riley stepped forward and said in a voice that carried across the plains, the way a voice carries when a man has been holding it in for 2 years. Mrs. Whitmore, whatever happens at sundown, every man here saw what happened, and every man here will ride to Helena in the morning. Mr. Riley? Ma'am? Your brother. He is dead, ma'am. He would be proud of you today. Ma'am, I hope so. That is the whole of why I am standing here. At 6, the dust rose on the western road. At 6:20, Colton Reed came up over the rise with 10 men. He stopped at the gate. He did not dismount. He saw the 7 men in her yard. He saw Ethan on the porch beside her. He saw the rifle across her arms. For one long moment, no one spoke. Then Colton Reed said in a voice that did not carry as far as Tom Riley's had, Mrs. Whitmore, I have come for the property." And Clara Whitmore, with 7 neighbors behind her and 1 cowboy beside her and a dead husband's name in her pocket, answered, "Mr. Reed, you are going to have to come through every man in this yard to get it. And by morning, a federal marshal in Helena is going to know every wire you sent last August. Now, do you still want the property, sir, or do you want to ride home while you still have a home to ride to?" The 7 men did not move. The 10 men behind Colton Reed did. 2 of them, just 2 at first, edged their horses back. Then 3, then 4. A hired gun is a hired gun until the moment he understands that the gun he is hired to is pointing at a room with witnesses in it, and then he becomes a man again, and a man does not hang for another man's copper. Silas Pike stayed. The man with the scar stayed. The rest began slowly to turn. Colton Reed did not look at them. He looked at Clara. Only at Clara. And she met his eyes, and she did not blink because she was not going to be the one who blinked. Not on this porch. Not on this day. Not in the house her husband had died for. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Mr. Reed." "This is not finished." "No, sir, it is not. It is finished when a federal marshal says it is finished. And the next time you stand on a porch of mine, sir, you will do it in chains." He turned his horse. He rode. Silas Pike and the man with the scar rode after him, because a foreman without a boss is a man without wages, and they knew it, even if they did not yet know how bad the wages were about to get. The 7 men in her yard did not cheer. They did not move. They stood with their hats in their hands until the dust had settled all the way down the western road. Then Tom Riley put his hat back on. He tipped it at her. He said, "Ma'am, we will be back at first light. If he comes in the night fire, 3 shots, and every man here will be in your yard before the 4th. "Mr. Riley." "Ma'am." "Thank you." "No, ma'am. Do not thank me. I have been waiting 2 years to stand on somebody's porch." They rode out in 2s and 3s. By dark, it was only her and Ethan again on the porch, in the same 2 places they had stood an hour before, and the dust was gone, and the smoke on the northern horizon had thinned to nothing, and Clara Whitmore lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking again, but they were shaking in a new way this time. "Ethan." "Clara." I said I had something to say to you when this was over." "Yes, ma'am." "It is not over." "No, ma'am." "But." "Yes, Clara. It is over enough for tonight." She turned to face him. She did not touch him. He did not touch her. They stood 2 feet apart on the porch she had been going to lose by sundown, and she looked up at him, and she said in a voice that was not the voice of the woman he had met at the window 4 nights ago. "Ethan Cross, when I am alone in this house, I am not alone anymore. I have not been alone since the night you would not ride off until I threw the bolt. I did not know it then. I know it now. And whatever comes at first light, and whatever comes from Helena, and whatever comes after Helena, I want you to know it too." He did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was very quiet. "Clara." "Yes. I have known it since the candle." "Since the candle," she said. "You said that like it meant something you had already decided." "It did, Clara." "You decided at a window." "I decided the moment you did not stop stitching when you thought no one was watching. That is not a thing a man chooses. That is a thing a man recognizes." She did not answer. She did not have to. She went inside the house. He stayed on the porch because the house was still hers, and he was still the man who slept in the barn, and neither of them was going to change that tonight, not with Colton Reed breathing somewhere 4 miles west, and a federal marshal still 2 days' ride away. She did not sleep. He did not sleep. At 1 in the morning she heard him on the porch walking the length of it, and she knew he was walking it because a man who had decided something about a woman did not sleep while that woman was between her own 4 walls and the dark. At 2, she opened the door. "Ethan?" "Clara?" "Come inside." "Ma'am?" "Come inside. Not to stay, to sit. I cannot sew. You cannot walk a porch until dawn. We are 2 grown people. Come inside." He came inside. He sat at her table. She put the last of the chicory on the stove. They did not speak for a long time. When she finally did, it was not about Reed. It was not about the 40 acres. It was not about the marshal. "I have not cried, Ethan." "No, ma'am. Not at the funeral. Not at the will. Not when Boyd sold my note. Not when you showed me the wires. No. I do not know what is wrong with me. Clara, there is nothing wrong with you. A woman who has been carrying a house on her shoulders for 7 months does not get to put it down in one night. She puts it down one piece at a time. And the tears come when the last piece is off, not the first. When will the last piece be off? I do not know. But it will be off, and I will be sitting at a table when it is." She looked at him. She did not cry then either, but something inside her chest, the thing that had been braced for 7 months, like a door held shut against a wind, eased 1 inch. Just one. And she breathed for the first time in a long time, all the way down to the bottom of her lungs. They sat until the sun came up. Tom Riley rode in at first light as promised. So did his brothers. So did the 4 men from the Lazy M, and 2 more because word had traveled in the night the way word travels in a county that has been waiting 2 years to travel. By 7, there were 11 men in her yard. By 8, there were 14. By 10, Colton Reed had not come, and Clara understood before Ethan said it out loud that Colton Reed was not coming. A man like Colton Reed did not ride up to a yard of 14 witnesses. A man like Colton Reed rode for Helena, or he rode for the territorial line, or he rode for the one place in this country where a federal warrant had not yet been sworn. "He will run," Ethan said. "He will run. And he will be caught. He will be caught. Or he will not." "Ethan." "Yes. If he is not caught." "Yes. We will still have won." "Yes, Clara. We will still have won." The marshal came on the 4th day. His name was J.T. Halloran. He was a tall man with a quiet voice and a badge he did not show until he was asked. He read Eben Marsh's wires twice. He interviewed Tom Riley. He interviewed the telegraph clerk in town, who confirmed on the record every word. He interviewed Harlan Boyd at the bank, and Harlan Boyd went gray halfway through the interview and sat down in a chair he did not get up from for a long hour. He rode out to the 40 acres. He stood where the claim hut had been. He looked at the ash. He did not say much. He did not have to. On the 7th day, he came back to Clara's porch with a folder and a pen. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Marshal." "The note on your property, ma'am. Mr. Boyd has agreed under the circumstances to reassign it to the territorial court, pending the outcome of the investigation into Mr. Reed. In practice, ma'am, that means no one is coming to put you off this land. Not in 7 days. Not in 70. Until a court says otherwise, the note is frozen." "Frozen?" "Frozen, ma'am." "And the 40 acres. The 40 acres are yours, Mrs. Whitmore. The deed is in your Bible. The survey is in Helena. The claim hut can be rebuilt. A burned marker does not unmake a filed claim. Mr. Reed or his lawyers or whoever inherits his estate, if he does not come back alive, can contest it in court. They will lose, ma'am. I am telling you that as a man who has seen a lot of courts." "Marshal?" "Yes, ma'am." "Is he going to come back alive?" "Ma'am, I do not know. A man who runs for the Canadian line with 4 of his own hired men turning on him tends not to." "Turning on him." "Silas Pike came in yesterday morning, Mrs. Whitmore. Walked into the office in Bozeman and asked to make a statement. About your husband. About the horse. About who paid who to put a burr under the saddle on the morning of the 12th of August. The table she was leaning on held her up. She was grateful for it. Paid who, Marshal? A stable hand, ma'am. Who has since left the county. But Pike knows where, and Pike is telling. He is telling in exchange for his neck. Will he hang? He will not hang. He will go to prison. For a long time. But he will not hang because he came in before the rope was tied. That is how it works, Mrs. Whitmore. That is not justice. That is the machinery of justice. They are not the same thing, and I will not tell you they are. Marshal Halloran? Yes, ma'am. I do not want him to hang. I want him to sit in a cell for 30 years and think about my husband every morning when the light comes through the bars. That is a different thing from hanging. It is a longer thing." "Yes, ma'am, it is." The marshal rode out. Ethan was at the gate. He watched the marshal go. He came up the porch steps slowly because he had been sleeping in the barn for 11 nights, and he did not yet know whether tonight was a different night. "Clara." "Ethan, he is not coming to put you off the land." "No." "And the 40 acres are mine." Then. She did not know what to say next. She had not practiced what came next. A woman who has spent 7 months rehearsing how to hold a house does not have a line ready for the evening she gets to stop holding it. Ethan Cross. "Yes, Clara." "Sleep in the house tonight." "Ma'am, not in my bed, Ethan. I am not asking you that. I am asking you to sleep under this roof. In the room Jonah built for a child that never came. Because you have slept in a barn for 11 nights on my behalf, and a woman who lets a man sleep in a barn for 11 nights on her behalf and does not then open a door to him is a woman who has not yet understood what a partnership is." Clara. "Yes. If I sleep under this roof tonight, I am going to sleep under it tomorrow." "Yes. And the night after?" "Yes. And the one after that?" Ethan. "Yes." "Then I will sleep in the barn one more night, Clara." "Why?" "Because when I come inside this house to stay, I am coming in as a husband, and a man does not walk across a threshold as a husband at 2 in the morning on the day a federal marshal has ridden out of the yard. A man walks across it in the light with his hat in his hand and with the woman's own word under her own sky. I can wait one more night for that." She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time. She said, "Tomorrow at noon." He said, "Yes, Clara." She did not cry then either, but she came very close, and he saw how close, and he turned and walked to the barn without another word, because a man who loves a woman does not stay to watch her fight tears she has not yet decided to let fall. The tears came that night alone in her own bed. They came the way he had said they would, not all at once, not for show, but one piece at a time. She cried for Jonah. She cried for the 7 months she had spent thinking she was alone. She cried for the letter from the bank, and for Mrs. Baxter's hard look, and for the $41 and the jar of buttons. She cried for the woman she had been at the window who had thought she was being watched, and she cried with a kind of gratitude for the man who had been watching, who had turned out not to be watching at all, but standing quietly where she would need him to be standing. In the morning she washed her face, and she braided her hair, and she put on the one dress she had that was not patched, and she sat at her table until noon. He came at noon. He came with his hat in his hand exactly as he had said. He did not kneel. He did not give a speech. He stood in her doorway, the way he had stood in it the day he brought her the torn jacket, and he said, "Clara, Ethan, from now on you will not carry this alone. Not this house, not this land, not the memory of Jonah, which is your memory, and will stay your memory, and which I will not try to fill. I am not here to be your husband before I have earned the word. I am here to be the man who stands beside you while you decide whether the word ever fits." Ethan Cross? "Clara, come inside." He came inside. He put his hat on the peg by the door, which was the peg Jonah's hat had hung on, and which had been empty for 7 months, and which was the right peg. Because a peg is not a grave, and a house that refuses to let a second hat hang on it is a house that has stopped being a house. They did not marry that week. They waited. They waited because Clara had decided somewhere between the rifle and the marshal that a woman does not walk from one husband's grave to another husband's altar in a single season, and Ethan had decided somewhere between the candle and the copper that a man who rushes a woman through her own grief is a man who will spend the rest of his life wondering if she ever really chose him. They waited 11 months. In those months, the federal court in Helena took Colton Reed's estate apart, the way a careful woman takes apart a cheap coat seam by seam, finding what had been hidden in the lining. Reed himself was caught at the Canadian border in May, in a wagon under a false name, with $2,000 in cash sewn into his saddle. He did not hang. He went to the federal prison in Wyoming, where he lived 11 years and died of a fever the doctors could not name. Silas Pike served 14 years. The man with the scar served 8. Harlan Boyd resigned from the bank and left Red Hollow on a wagon that did not have his name painted on the side, and no one in the county mourned him. The copper vein was real. A mining company from Butte offered Clara $12,000 for the mineral rights in July. She turned them down. They came back in September with $18,000. She turned them down again. In December, they came back with $24,000 and a 99-year lease that left the surface rights in her name, and she signed because Ethan had sat at her table and helped her read the contract 3 nights in a row, and because $24,000 was not a fortune a woman needed, but it was a fortune a county needed, and Clara Whitmore had plans for a county. She paid off the note on the house in a single morning. She walked into the bank herself. She put the money on the counter. She did not speak to the new banker longer than she had to. She paid off Tom Riley's mortgage too, anonymously. Tom Riley figured out who had done it by supper and rode over to her porch at sundown and said, "Ma'am, I cannot take this." And she said, "Mr. Riley, you stood on my porch at sundown with your hat in your hands and 7 men behind you. That is a debt I owe you. Do not take this from me. I have been trying to pay it for a year." He took it. She opened a seamstress's school in the winter of 1880. Not a charity, a school with 8 chairs and 8 sewing tables and a sign Ethan hung himself over the door. She took in 11 girls the first year. 6 of them were daughters of widows. 2 of them were widows themselves. One of them was the child her husband had once pulled out of a creek, now 14, with her father's gratitude and her mother's steady hand. The school paid for itself by the 2nd year. By the 3rd, it was paying for 2 more. Clara and Ethan married on the 1st of April, 1881, 2 years to the day, from the morning the bank note had been meant to come due. They married in her kitchen with Tom Riley and his brothers, and the 4 men from the Lazy M and the preacher, who had not come to see her for 7 months after Jonah's death, but who had learned in the interim the shape of his own failure and had apologized for it in a letter Clara had kept because she believed in letters that admitted things. She wore a dress she had made herself. Ethan wore the blue wool coat with the mended shoulder. He would not be buried in any other coat, he said, and she told him not to talk about being buried on the day he was marrying her, and he said, "Clara, a man who loves a woman thinks about her funeral the day he puts the ring on her finger, because he is deciding in that moment whether he will be the one carrying her to it or the one she carries to his. And either way, it is a promise, and a promise deserves a thought." She said, "Ethan Cross, you read too much." He said, "Yes, ma'am. It is one of my failings." They had 3 children. The first was a girl who they named Martha after Clara's mother. The second was a boy who they named Thomas after Tom Riley. The third was a girl who they named Jane after no one in particular, because Clara said at the birth that the baby deserved to choose her own people to be named for. And Jane grew up to be in fact a woman who named herself for no one, and was by all accounts the most Whitmore of all the Whitmores. The candle stayed on the sewing table. Clara did not always sew by it anymore. She had money now, and she had a school, and she had 3 children, and the stitches she set were mostly for her daughter's dresses, and her son's trousers, and the occasional fine piece of lacework she took on as a pleasure. But the candle stayed, because a woman does not throw away the thing that kept her alive, and a man does not ask her to. On the night of their 25th anniversary, Ethan came in from the barn where he had been mending a harness. He was 56 by then. His hair had gone almost all the way to gray, and his hands had the rope scars of a lifetime of work, and his eyes when he looked at her were the same eyes he had had at her window the night the candle was almost out. "Clara." "Ethan." "I have been thinking about a thing." "You are always thinking about a thing. I have been thinking that I cannot sew." "Ethan, you have been sitting beside me for 25 years learning to sew. You are terrible at it. I do not know how you can be this bad at a thing after 25 years of trying." "Yes, ma'am. That is the thing I have been thinking about. And I am glad I am bad at it, because if I had ever gotten good at it, you would not have needed me to sit next to you anymore, and I wanted to sit next to you for the rest of my life, so I have on purpose not improved." She laughed then. She laughed the way she had laughed the first night at her window, when the laugh had come out as something closer to a cough. Except now, a quarter of a century later, the laugh came out as a laugh, and it filled the kitchen, and it rose up out of the house and into the plains of Red Hollow, Montana, which was no longer Red Hollow. In any way, it had been in 1879, because Clara Whitmore's school had made 64 seamstresses in 25 years, and her copper lease had built a road and a schoolhouse and a church that did not turn widows away. And the town was a different town now, with a different soul, and some of that soul had been built stitch by stitch by a woman who had been counting to 145 in the dark on the night a cowboy rode past her window and did not ride off. Ethan Cross. Clara. You did not come to my window by accident that night. No, Clara. You came because you had been looking for a way to come for 3 weeks. Yes, ma'am. And in 25 years, I have never asked you what you would have done if I had not had a torn jacket to give you as an excuse to come back. I would have torn one myself, Clara. On purpose. On purpose. Ethan. Yes. I love you. Yes, Clara, I know. I have known it since the candle. She reached across the table. She took his hand. His hand was rough, and hers was rough, and they had both earned the rough, and neither of them apologized for it. She held it for a long moment, and then she said quietly, the thing she had not said out loud in 25 years, because some things a woman does not need to say out loud to the man who has been sleeping next to her for a quarter of a century, but sometimes on an anniversary, with a candle still burning on a table. She says them anyway, because a promise renewed is a promise kept twice. You do not have to carry this alone. No, Clara. And neither do I. No, Clara. She did not carry anything alone from that night to the last night of her life, which came in the autumn of 1923, in the same house with Ethan at her side, where he had been without a single night's absence for 42 years. She went the way she had lived, with her hand in his, and her jaw set, and no debt left unpaid to any soul in the county, and the candle on the sewing table beside her bed, burning steady, until he, weeping for the first time in her sight in all those decades, blew it out. The candle was relit the next morning by her daughter Martha, who had learned from her mother that a candle does not go out because a woman has. Martha kept it burning through the funeral, and through the week after, and through the winter, and through every winter for the rest of her own life. And in the town of Red Hollow, Montana, for 100 years afterward, when a young woman married and moved into her first house, and did not yet know whether she would be strong enough to hold it, her mother would give her a single tallow candle, and she would say, "This is the Whitmore candle. You do not have to carry it alone. No woman in this county ever has to, because one did once until she did not, and that was the end of women carrying houses alone in this place." And that, in the harsh plains of Red Hollow, Montana, was the true and final ending of the story of Clara Whitmore and Ethan Cross. That a man came to a window one night and did not ride off, and a woman stopped counting stitches in the dark, and together, not as rescue, not as pity, not as charity, but as partnership, chosen every morning for 42 years, they built a house, a family, a school, and a town, and they proved once and for all to every soul who ever doubted it, that real love is not the moment a man saves a woman from her burden, but the moment two people decide together that no burden worth carrying was ever meant to be carried alone.